And there we go. And I'm going to start the webinar. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, great. Welcome everyone again to the 1 o'clock therapeutic or therapist panel as part of the 11th annual Transforming Trauma Conference. We're going to get started with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of the many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Thank you everyone for being here today. Looks like Rob has joined us. Hey Rob. I'm just going to briefly introduce the panel of speakers. I'm going to put everybody on the screen here real quick. So we have today Deb Maybury. Deb, if you could just say hello, wave at the screen, that would be awesome. Sheri Jackson, Catherine Junn, Rob Hawkings, and Jessica Field. Jessica is not a therapist, but is a professor, artist, poet. We're going to be talking to Jessica about poetry and art soon in this workshop. We're going to get started with Deb today. So I'm just going to ask Deb if she can unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the modalities that you practice, and maybe if you can offer a technique or two to the audience, that would be great.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here at the conference. I do miss it in person, but thank you so much, Maria, for asking me to participate today. Those of you that don't know me, I've been at the Gatehouse for a long time. I originally went there many years ago as a research project for my book, Unlock the Door Beyond Sexual Abuse, and I never realized what impact that being at the Gatehouse would have on me. I began as somebody who participated in the groups, and then I've gone on for the last 10 years in January. I think I facilitated around 25 groups at this point. So it's been a really long journey. And over the years, I've learned a lot about myself in a number of ways. I've learned about the impact of childhood sexual experiences on participants. And I've learned a lot about how to incorporate or shift those experiences in our life. And I've also learned a lot about the people that volunteer at the Gatehouse and the advocates that they are. So if you're in that position, thank you, thank you. I'm going to talk about some of the modalities and things that I do, but the first thing I want to do, because I don't want to miss this at the end. If anything is missed, I don't want it to be this. So I want to share this with people that maybe are looking for a therapist or have a therapist or are just struggling and listening to this today. It's so critical that the healing journey involves other people, whether that's a therapist or a group such as the Gatehouse. But a person needs to be heard. And it's really difficult to heal on your own, because you're doing that with, if you're doing that, that's the same mind that is the mind that was harmed as a child. So there can be a lot of false beliefs that are in there, and it's really good to have a different perspective to help you work through whatever it is that you need to work through. I've always said that the connection is in the healing, and that relationship with a therapist or with a group is so critical in having the ability to move forward. So just something really briefly about that experience is I always say to people that approach me as a potential psychotherapist is to do an interview process. Talk to different people, different modalities, because it will be that connection that determines typically how a person does. You want to be able to resonate with that individual that you're working with, and also to have a circle of care. So if you were on one-on-one therapy, maybe you'd also be on group therapy at the same time. I have a number of people that when I'm working with them, they're involved in art therapy or something else. And I think it's really important to have successful therapy is to have an open communication with the therapist and be open to learning other things. I know in the years when I was in martial arts, I had a main style, and then I went out and I experimented in a lot of different things. And I think that's something, because a person changes over time when you're doing the work, as they call it. So sometimes the shift is okay as well. Excuse me. So just a little bit about myself. I consider myself a spiritual psychotherapist. And all that truly means is I believe in incorporating the mind, body, and spirit. I don't think you can just focus on one thing, whatever the modality is. You need to really incorporate the whole person and integrate a variety of experiences within that person. And sometimes that's very emotional, sometimes it's spiritual, and sometimes it's physical. I think we're really lucky that there's such a rich environment of different modalities now to support somebody who's struggling, whether that's sexual abuse or something else. You know, we have like psychotherapists going back 80 years or something like that, where you can take a deep dive, broad. You can be doing therapy every day for years and years. That would not be helpful for me. I'm more about working on whatever it is at the time that's the dominant thread, working around that, not going back and opening things that maybe don't need to be opened, but that depends on the person. There's also something called somatic healing that I've done a lot of work in, though not currently. Energy healing is a huge thing that people work with. One of the most significant shifts I had as somebody searching sort of in the spiritual area was with Reiki, and realizing that by somebody moving the energy around my body, I could feel differently. So my whole point to that is to go out and research what it is that you think that would serve you, and incorporate those various things into your life. The spiritual component can be really deep. Again, this is not religious dogma or something like that. It can be as simple as what is your purpose in life? What is the meaning of things? And knowing that can enhance somebody's journey with hope or forgiveness and other things. Physical, if you're sitting in the same spot day after day after day, experiencing depression or anxiety, if you're not moving your body, it's going to be really hard to shift what's going on in your mind. So you can see how these things all work together. And, I have books around me, but if you're reading and bombarding yourself only with, books about narcissism and all of these things, it's good to get an understanding. But if that's all that you're doing, those other areas of your life are going to be impacted. So it's really important to incorporate a variety of things in your healing journey along the way. One thing that I've found that's critical, it doesn't matter who it is or what the situation they're dealing with is, it's around a person's narrative. The narrative, the self-talk, the belief structure, all impact us in so many different ways. Who is it that's talking to you in your mind? Where is your mind anyways? Is it in your brain? I'm very interested in these types of concepts and ideas, because if we think along a certain path or walk along the same path the entire time, that's going to impact our bodies. It's going to impact our outlooks in life. It's going to impact every part of ourselves. So understanding how critical developing a relationship with the narrative is, I think, is so important. And I've seen so many people that haven't even sort of thought about their narrative. It's just something that starts and it creates a belief system. And how much of it is really true anyways? What has landed and come in as a child, 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, is that still true as an adult? How much weight do we give those thoughts? So I think exploring the narrative is really important. The other thing that I'm really interested in, and I think that people would serve themselves by learning about, is the emotional charges that you have, that we have to different things in our life. The emotional charges around memories, around people, around environments. A lot of times people refer to emotional charges as triggers. I like to break it down into smaller components and really to find links to exactly what that is. And again, going to the narrative is to call things exactly what they are. So if somebody comes in and says they have anxiety, what is anxiety to you? because what it is to you is different than what it is to me. And that meaning, that narrative is going to impact the therapy. So I think it's really important to be aware of the narrative and the emotional charges that people use. There's this a saying that says, a memory without a charge is called wisdom. And I think for myself, that's always where I've aspired to be, is to reduce the charges so I can sit back and really look at and explore what has happened to me. Third thing that's really important to me is a person's subconscious. Apparently, over 90% of what goes on in our bodies and in our lives is sort of unknown on a conscious level to ourselves. And exploring that to me is very important, because you can have a reaction to something and not even have an understanding of why it is there. So exploring that area to me is really important. Just jumping through here some of my notes. One of the things that Maria wanted to offer is sort of like some ways or things that we do in our practice. So one of the things that I do that I found really effective is something called havening. So havening is a relatively new modality. I think 10 to 15 years it's been out there. It's created by doctors sort of accidentally when they were studying trauma and trauma in the brain. So when something happens, the higher the emotional level, childhood sexual abuse as a child, that's highly charged. There's a lot of emotion there. So the really simple thing, the neurons in the brains get fired, high emotional state, and they get locked. They lock into our brain, they lock into our body as a memory. That's a physical level. So how do we break that charge? How do we depotentiate the AMPA receptor with behavioring language? Havening works on touch, which elicits delta waves in the brain, which are safety waves. So, when you feel comfortable, if somebody hugs you that you care about, when you stroke a baby on the face, or when we hold each other's hands, this is all a part of sort of the idea of havening. There's a really good video, and if you're interested in this, it's on my site, debmayburytherapy.com, under the modality section. And I find that that's the most effective one on havening. Learning about what's happening physically to your brain, I think, is really important in understanding trauma. And there's a lot of knowledge out there now. That's just, you hit Google and you can find out a lot about that. Another modality I use a lot is something called spiritual technology. It's not very well known, but there's a trauma process in this that I found really effective. Actually, Maria's listening. She's somebody who has done that in the past. Again, it breaks a charge, and this is what havening does. It breaks a charge, and I can't go into exactly how that happens, but if you can lessen that charge, a person can get themselves grounded a little bit. These are ways to get grounded and move through some of the other type of healing that has to go on. Another thing that I utilize is havening and hypnosis. Hypnosis is something, I don't know if you've experienced that. There's a lot of myths around hypnosis and around stage hypnosis, but it's really just altering a state. We alter our states all the time. Think about driving somewhere, you're in the car and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember the last 10 minutes. What happens is the subconscious steps up, it's driving the car, and the conscious is sort of resting at that time. And I like to think of hypnosis that way. So I use different scripts, or any hypnotist will use different scripts specifically in areas where that suggestion can serve to either lessen a feeling, an experience that you don't want, or heighten something like resilience that you do want. I've actually been really, I'll have to just layman's, blown away by some of the responses to the sleeping hypnosis that I've been doing one-on-one. Actually, I'm going to be doing a group hypnosis starting up this week. If anybody's interested, please contact me right away, Thursday evenings. Because when a person has been victimized as a child sexually, they're hyper vigilant all the time. You know, you hear everything everywhere in the house. Still, as an adult, you're hearing things. You can't sleep. Even thinking about sleep causes a lot of anxiety. And I find that hypnosis dives into that subconscious piece, and you're not going anywhere where you don't want to go. You're not going to be told to do something. You can always get out of the hypnosis. It's very safe. But when you're there, you're open because you're in a different state, a different conscious level. And those suggestions are dropped in. Just like when maybe you're listening to a meditation, you go into a different state, you find it calming, you find it grounding. I've done that many times. So the hypnosis, I find, is an even deeper way to get into those parts of ourselves that we want to alter and shift. 90% of us is the subconscious. This has been talked about and proven in many ways. So to me, understanding that on a deeper way has been a part of my research, and all of the things that I do as a psychotherapist, I've dove into as a person that wants to learn that for myself too. So, I've kind of scooted through things really quickly, and I'm not sure how much time is left, because even though I put my cell phone beside me, I forgot to turn on my timer. But one of the just the final thing that I want to say today is, whatever therapy that you use, there's never any guarantee to have a specific outcome. But if you connect with a therapist that feels safe and that you resonate with, you can create a deeper understanding of what has happened in your life. And in childhood sexual abuse, the number one thing is always, you're not responsible for anything that happened to you as a child. You're not responsible for the way you've reacted. If your body responded in a certain way that was pleasurable, that's your body doing what it's supposed to do. It's somebody else has put you in that situation that is completely inappropriate as a child. So whatever it is that you're experiencing right now, as somebody listening to this, somebody that's being through childhood sexual abuse, you're not responsible for what happened to you, but know that there's a pathway to find healing, and you are responsible for that. So I wish you all the best on your healing journey. And again, thank you, Maria, for all that you do, and the staff and volunteers at the Gatehouse. And I'm going to pass you guys off to Sheri. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Deb. I connected with so much of what you were saying, and I think so many of these modalities overlap. So first, I'll just start by introducing myself. My name's Sheri Jackson. I'm a certified addiction counselor, level 2, and the owner of Healing Moments. I too have been connected with the Gatehouse for, I'm not even sure how many years now, but it's been a few years, and had the pleasure of facilitating both phase 1 and phase 2 groups. And it's definitely a huge blessing in my life. I am a firm believer in peer support. I think there is so much healing to be found in peer support groups. And on a personal note, I've been sober myself for over 10 years, and I am a childhood survivor of childhood sexual abuse as well. So I certainly think my lived experience brings something to the table as a counselor, and I certainly disclose lived experience when appropriate, and it certainly helps build a trusting rapport with clients, knowing that, I understand and I've been there as well. So for me, transforming trauma it gave meaning to my experience, and that's why I became an addiction counselor. I love quotes, and Gabor Mate said, "It is impossible to understand addiction without asking what relief the addict finds or hopes to find in the drug or the addictive behavior. The attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain." So we need to ask not why the addiction, but why the pain. And, I don't have statistics because my community, the recovery community, is anonymous. But there's certainly most of the clients and a lot of the people that I've dealt with in the recovery community are survivors. And I always say underneath that iceberg of addiction are so many things: trauma, anxiety, depression, shame, guilt, abuse, stress. And we have to concurrently treat those things. And I understand every client's different. But in my experience, having a, period of abstinence and sobriety before coming in and dealing with the, possible childhood sexual abuse or trauma from childhood is important. You need to have that baseline, because obviously all of those emotions that we've been medicating for decades, that was my coping skill, was to medicate all of these emotions start to come up when you're sober. So you want to make sure that you've, got some sobriety in place before you start unpacking, and every client's different. Also, the, looking through the lens of addiction, one of the challenges that I have is just breaking through the denial of it all. And we often use the stages of change model within addiction. And, there's the pre-contemplation. So you're not yet considering a change, you're not sure if you can change. So, as a counselor, the primary task there is to start raising some awareness. Then you go to the contemplation, which is you see the possibility to change, but you're ambivalent and uncertain. So again, the primary task there is to, resolve that ambivalence and try to move you to the next stage of change, which is determination. That means you're committed to changing. You're still considering what to do, but you want to get some appropriate strategies in there. The next one, we're going to take some action. So taking steps, positive steps towards that change, and helping to implement good change strategies. So I have a great toolbox for that I have. Maintenance, again, that's, we've achieved your goal, but you constantly want to maintain that. I can tell you on a personal level, I could not have maintained 10 years of sobriety if I wasn't heavily involved and active in the recovery community. That's how I stay sober, is by connecting with people. And I know Deb mentioned that connection is key. I can't do this stuff alone. So that's why I find peer support and recovery groups invaluable to making these changes. And of course, the last stage is, if by chance, we hope we don't relapse. Unfortunately, it can be common with addiction to have a relapse. So we want to make sure that we can cope with those consequences, determine next steps, and get you back on track. And with me, for addictions, I like using the CBT model. It's certainly evidence-based. Thoughts are connected to feelings, and then I take action on those feelings. So it's about seeing the cycle there and definitely recognizing the cognitive distortions that come, especially with addiction. So I have something, I call it the truth filter, that I get some of my clients to run through their thoughts around drinking. So part of my truth filter is ask yourself these questions if you're about to, pick up a substance. Do I rationalize? Do I justify? Do I deny? Do I minimize? Do I blame? Or do I catastrophize? So I kind of gave a few examples of this, like, do I rationalize and justify? So something I would do is I would say, I worked hard, I deserve a drink. And usually anybody in addiction, if you got the word deserve and drink in the same sentence, chances are you are very much rationalizing that behavior. So it's important to look at, again, the phrases, the narrative that we're telling ourselves. The denial. I don't have a drinking problem. Everybody drinks like this. That was one of my favorites. But what I came to realize later through good peer support and recovery is that I hang out with people that drink like me. I don't hang out with social drinkers. I hang out with people that drink the way I do. So that way, that was a great rationalization and a good way for me to really stay in denial with my problem. Again, another thing I denied, I have a job, I still have a car, therefore I cannot have a problem with it. So again, the challenge is breaking through that, those thought patterns. I would minimize, I only had a few drinks. Well, if you saw the wine glass that I poured those drinks into right to the top, sure, I only had 3, but that was 2 bottles later. So again, looking at those types of things. Blaming is very classic in addiction, you know, something like, oh, my spouse puts me in such a bad mood, I have to have a drink. So that's, you know, that's another one in the truth filter. And, you know, catastrophizing, you know, something like, I can't be sober on New Year's. Nobody else is going to be sober. I'm going to have a horrific year if I don't start the new year off with a bang. So I can catastrophize anything. And again, recognizing those cognitive distortions has been key. One thing that I like to do personally is kind of try to combine 2 modalities, which are CBT and the 12 steps, because I find, again, a 12-step community or the recovery community is a very inexpensive way to get peer support, you know, as well as any peer support group is so helpful. But again, you got to, you know, kind of have some parameters surrounding that. So when I work with clients, I like them to be able to kind of cross-reference those 2 modalities so that they can keep an open mind taking it into, you know, a 12-step world, because oftentimes some people, you know, are not open-minded to the 12 steps. So I like to try and incorporate a little bit of that. And to me, it's all transferable knowledge. The modalities can be slightly different verbiage, but there's a lot of transferable knowledge so that you can sit there and get excellent, you know, very inexpensive, basically free peer support in a recovery community. So to be able to do that is something that I find has been beneficial. So what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about my sobriety toolbox. So I really feel that it's important, especially in early sobriety, to have a toolbox. So I get my clients to make one. It can be a physical kind of box. Some people use a recipe card box or something like that, and cue cards to put that on. You know, someplace where they've got it very handy so that they can refer to it. And also, you know, for anybody else, I know everybody usually has their phones within, you know, a foot of them. So having that connection there so that when you're feeling the compulsion or feeling something or some of those emotions come up or some past trauma comes up, that you've got that toolbox, you know, right on the ready. Because I have to put, you know, a little bit of distance in between the compulsion to go and drink or use, and having a tool in between that has been very helpful. I also suggest to my clients to have a physical toolbox, like a portable one that contains some goodies in there, like, you know, some tea bags, essential oils, a notepad in case you need to journal out some feelings, mementos such as pictures of loved ones. Some of my clients like fidget spinners or the spinner rings. They're also called meditation or worry rings. So oftentimes, you know, they can be sitting there in a meeting, and if an emotion comes up, you can just sit there and just gently, you know, do something again to bring yourself into the current moment. Just these small things can certainly help somebody to stay sober. I recommend a 7-day recovery plan. I know I personally drank a lot out of boredom. So I would sit there, and they've got a recovery plan so that you can be sitting there going, okay, it's Monday at 7 o'clock. Oh my gosh, I should be at a meeting or I should be doing this. So I find that that can help ease the cravings and have you focused. Obviously, staying away from risky situations in people, clearing alcohol and things out of your house. Practicing one day at a time. It's great. I remember when I first came into recovery, I'm like, well, I know this is abstinence. You know, I thought you're kind of fibbing to me but they said, no, it's abstinence, but let's do it one day at a time. Because again, I'm a catastrophizer. It's summer and I'm already thinking about how I'm going to get through New Year's. So definitely a good reminder to remain present and in the moment. Identifying your own triggers, making a gratitude list has been huge, right? Reminding yourself, you know, why you're doing what you're doing. Some great breathing exercises is another thing I put into the toolkit, such as, I mean, there's so many of them. I like the 5-7-8 breathing technique. It involves you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold the breath for 7 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds. That's huge in a moment. I use that often. Meditation, so many, free guided meditations that you can download on your phone. I highly recommend therapy because, again, we need to unpack the trauma and do it concurrently while managing the addiction. So that can be a delicate process, and you definitely need, some help, professional help with doing the trauma. And again, the Gatehouse is a wonderful place for peer support groups to, be able to know that you're with people that have had the same shared experience you have. There's a comfort level for that. Again, getting connected to the recovery community, I can't state it enough. I definitely have done two things right in my own sobriety. I didn't pick up a drink and I went to meetings. The rest of the stuff, my AA sponsor would probably tell me is subjective. But, again, it's about doing those things, staying connected, talking to people. Deb also mentioned movement. I'm very spiritual as well. The mind, body, spirit connection, movement, exercise, yoga, dancing, dance it off, watch funny videos, whatever's going to shift that sort of, that feeling that you have. And we often talk about it in the Gatehouse. A feeling is an uncomfortable sensation. So is a craving. It's an uncomfortable sensation that will pass. Nutrition planning. Again, I know somebody's going to be talking about self-expression, creativity, journaling, arts, all of those things. Like I say, self-care, long hot baths, whatever it is, to get you to survive that craving. And my own sponsor's favorite line, I have a sponsor in AA, which I highly recommend, getting sponsorship, connected up, those people, those trusted people in your life, that inner circle that you can have to be able to pick up the phone. Surround yourself with more than one person because maybe somebody's not available. So have a backup list. That's another one for my toolkit. Make sure you got 10. Bye, Deb. Make sure you got 10 people, in your backup in case somebody's not there. You just keep going through the list. And, for me, the 12-step modality teaches us to be of service to others. So by all means, that helps to get me out of my own stuff. If I can, call somebody else and say, what, how's your day? How are you doing? So definitely some tools in my toolkit, but, again, unpacking these things concurrently has been hugely helpful. And that was just a few tools in my toolkit. So I am going to very much thank the Gatehouse for allowing me to be here today. Thank you so much for putting this together. I know how much work it is, and I'm going to pass it over to Catherine now.
I thought I was after, is it me next or Rob? Does it matter? Me? Okay, sorry. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sheri. I just kind of want to say everything Sheri mentioned. That was quite the toolkit. I've been involved with the Gatehouse, I think it's been 5 years. Wow. First, I found it as a very rageful survivor, living with a lot of shame and rage. So I found the Gatehouse as a participant, and then slowly found myself on the other side, facilitating groups. And then I decided to make that into a second career. And currently I'm qualifying RP at TERP, the Toronto Institute of Relational Psychotherapy. So to say that Gatehouse has had an impact on my life would be an understatement. It is a wonderful, wonderful resource for many of the reasons Deb and Sheri already mentioned. The connection, the feeling that you're not alone. I think with CSA in particular, it is a trauma that's often, hidden away, or you feel so alone with. It's not talked about much. That's changing, which is fantastic. So when I was able to find other people and felt that I wasn't alone, it was so healing. Just the connection that can be made at the Gatehouse or in other places can be so helpful. Sheri, you quoted Gabor Mate, and I also am like him as well. He's come up with a wonderful film called Wisdom of Trauma. And he talks about connection as, this safety is more than the removal of threat. It's the presence of connection. And I think places like the Gatehouse can really provide that. When I was leading groups at the Gatehouse, it became a bit of a joke or a mantra that I would always begin and end groups with. Remember, you're not alone and you don't have to do it alone. So it became sort of a thing that I would just kind of, people are saying, oh, we're going to get it on t-shirts. But I so believe that you're not alone in this. You're not alone. And people who may be listening in may be like, it takes for some people, it takes decades to come out, but just to know that you're not alone and you don't have to do it alone. You can find communities like the Gatehouse. You can find therapists like many of us here, because I don't think this is the kind of work that you're meant to do alone. So my modality, I'm training as a relational psychotherapist, and really that's about connection and relationships. It's the belief that the relationships in our lives, if those are going well, then you're feeling you're doing well. So the relationships, be it intimate, communal, work, global, and the one you have with yourself. If those are going well and healthy, then you feel good. And to flip it around, if those aren't going so well, then you don't feel so good. It sounds as simple as that. And I think we can all agree it's as difficult as that. That's some of the hardest thing you can do. So in terms of, taking care of those relationships, especially to yourself, self-care, obviously that's a big one. I've also did want to introduce this aspect of when I've worked with CSA survivors, many of my clients are from the BIPOC community. And I think that does bring sort of an added layer of sort of the intergenerational trauma, some sort of the cultural boundaries, like deep filial respect that can be a barrier, I think, at times to healing. So it's been sort of interesting to sort of unpack all that as well. So I guess in terms of, the things that I find helpful when I've been working with clients and the group, the toolkit, I use that language too. If you know your triggers, then you can prepare by looking into your toolkit. And Sheri, I think you pretty much mentioned like so many fantastic tools in your toolkit, and it really is dependent on what works for you. So just to add a few more to that toolkit Sheri was talking about, little things like one thing I do is if you just even something like your thumb and your index finger together and just try to feel the grooves. Sometimes you're in a public place where you can't, just like do a big breath or meditate or whatever, but something simple. All these are grounding techniques, right? Just to bring you back into the present, because often when the past shows up in the present, the past traumas, then that gets, you get hijacked emotionally and then it ungrounds you. So with a lot of my clients who also experience a lot of dissociation, which makes sense, given that CSA survivors, that's a way that a lot of us survive, frankly, that can often show up in the present, and something that was necessary for you to survive, to be dissociated from your body, maybe during the time of abuse. In the present, it can actually get in the way of healthy relationships and things like that. So we do a lot of sort of grounding techniques. Breathing is a really good one. I remember last year, Deb actually did this sort of like self-hugging, in which I think I've actually kind of do that myself, and it feels really nice. So those are really helpful. When it comes to a therapist, there are so many different modalities and different therapists, and I tell clients really just trust your gut, and look around. You don't have to buy the first pair of shoes in the store. You can always go back to it, but it's okay to just try a few out and see what feels good. And I always encourage I encourage them to trust their gut. Is this someone that I can feel safe with? Is this someone I can be honest with? Is this someone when things aren't going right, because ruptures are part of relationships, someone I can bring that up and repair, because wonderful things can happen in those moments of rupture, and especially when repair can take place. So those are, if you are looking for a therapist, those are some things to keep in mind. And I guess, the Gatehouse is a wonderful resource, because you'll find out that you're not alone. There's so many of us, and this is, everyone's healing journey looks different. You may have days where you're like, wow, I'm doing really great, 3 steps forward, and then you slide back. That's okay. Everybody's journey is different. There are people and resources to help. You're not alone. You're not meant to do it alone. So reach out. I know it takes huge amounts of courage to do so, but you deserve it at the end of the day. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you for the opportunity. Oh, and I'll pass it to Rob.
Thank you, Catherine. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Maria, for moderating this and for all the hard work I know you do organizing this conference and playing your role at the Gatehouse. I am a psychotherapist. I've been doing it for, going back to the early 90s, long before it was a regulated health profession. I've been grandfathered in since then, obviously. And my association with the Gatehouse goes back a long ways too. I was honored and privileged enough to be asked to lead the very first Gatehouse group for men, for male survivors. And I'm very pleased at how the services and support available for male survivors at the Gatehouse have grown since then. Kudos to everyone who's taken that ball and run with it so energetically. I too am one of the what I like to call wounded healers, people who may have come to this profession, certainly I did, propelled by or motivated by my own recovery. I was in the corporate business world for many years, and it was in my late 30s that I hit what's often called the nexus, or the connection between the difficulties I was having in life and having been abused as a child. I had been interested in psychotherapy as a profession of some kind as early as high school. But it's a good thing I did not find my way to doing that until much later in life, because having not done my own work, I would have been a terrible therapist, unaware of the issues that were driving what I was doing and my own biases and emotional reactions. So I'm grateful that I've come to this profession on the heels of my own recovery. In fact, my professional development and my personal recovery and healing journey have progressed almost in lockstep right from the very beginning. I have developed new skill sets, new kinds of experience, often as a result of things that have helped me in my life, my own journey. And I call it, I refer to it as my journey of recovery and healing, because like so many other male survivors and survivors of both genders, I have an addiction history. And the very first connection I made was not with having been a victim of childhood sexual abuse, but having grown up in an alcoholic home. And so I was fortunate enough I I don't have any qualms about saying I was guided by the hand of a higher power to a group, an Al-Anon group for adult children of alcoholics in Hamilton, Ontario, which allowed me to learn that I was not alone. And I just want to strongly echo what almost everyone so far has said about the importance of learning from others who have had the same experience, that you're not alone. That may be with an individual therapist initially, but at some point in the journey, it is so helpful to join a group of some kind, whether it's a 12-step self-help group or a therapy group or a support group such as the ones the Gatehouse runs. Working with men is in so many ways similar to working with women. The similarities are far greater and more numerous than the differences, but there are some key differences. And they're often described as myths about men and the impact of childhood sexual abuse on men. I like to think of it in terms of what some of you may know as the man box. It's a concept that's been used in a number of different kinds of group programs for men. But in a nutshell, what it is it refers to the socialization that males in the society go through about what being a man is all about or supposed to be all about. What it is okay to do or not to do, to think and not to think, to believe, not to believe, even to feel and not to feel. And it is an extremely constricting box to be in. And a big part of recovery and healing for men who've been sexually abused is learning to dismantle that man box and learn that it does not mean that you're weak and inadequate if you've been sexually victimized. That it is okay to have a full range of feelings, not just anger. Men are taught that anger is the only socially sanctioned and permissible emotional feeling. And so many other feelings will get funneled into anger. Breaking the silence is hugely important, as it is for all sexual abuse survivors. I was one of the key experiences I've had in my professional development was working with a team of very skilled American therapists, some Canadian. I was one of the few Canadians, mostly American therapists who ran residential weekends of recovery for men. The whole weekend was really structured around the centerpiece of a small breakout group session. There were typically 30 to 50 men at one of these weekends of recovery, a team of 8 or 10 therapists, and small breakout groups of 8 or 10 people. And one of those midday on the Saturday would be devoted totally to the men telling their stories. And I want to share some of the things that were so important about the way we did that. One is that it was contained. They knew they had 12 minutes to tell their story. And you know what? Every one of them managed to say what they needed to say within 12 minutes. And it meant everybody got a chance to be heard. And that they seemed to be able to call on the grounding skills they had learned and manage their emotional feelings enough to get the story told. And that was a success experience for them. And that's another thing that I've found is hugely important in working with men. This is the positive side of some of that man box stuff. Something that therapists like myself and others can work with is that for men, self-esteem is about accumulating a track record of success experiences, and not just success financially, career-wise, in sports or whatever. That's all toxic man box stuff. But that can be translated into success experiences with feelings, with being vulnerable, with relating to women in a healthy way. I'm mindful of time here. I just want to say a few words about the impact of COVID-19, the pandemic. This has made it very, very challenging for therapists as well as survivors. It's been that direct, energetic, interpersonal aspect of the healing relationship is not there. It's severely limited by audiovisual media such as this. And this is particularly challenging for survivors who have experienced abuse and neglect very early in life, often in the preverbal stage of life. They need that energetic, direct personal contact with people. Touch is great. It doesn't have to be touch. Just being in the same room with another person. There's a positive side to it as well, though. By using Zoom, we are able to reach out to a far greater geographic range of people. We're probably doing it here in this conference. I'm consulting with a group-based program in the Muskoka area now that uses a model called the fireweed model. That energetic personal interaction is limited, as I've just said, but we're able to incorporate people from London, Ontario, from more remote communities in Northern Ontario, all over the province in one group, which means that people who wouldn't have had access to a group experience otherwise can now have it. So there are some positives as well. And I've probably gone way over time. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica now.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a professor and instructor at Ryerson University, and I teach art courses. I usually teach art courses in coding and computers, but a lot of my work is helping students find their artistic voice. And I am also a professional artist, and I usually code and make robots to understand psychology in AI installations. But I just made this book, which is kind of why I'm here. And it's a poetry and drawing book about healing as a CSA survivor. So, and it's about, it's a book trying to reclaim medical terms we hear all the time, and trying to connect them to the experience of healing. And the point of the book was this discovery I've had. I'm new to the Gatehouse, actually. I have just become a member in the last 6 months. But what's really interesting in the creation of this book and being an artist is I'm in tune to imagination all the time. And I get, as my profession, to explore how profound it can be for your physical, spiritual, and mental self. And what's been really interesting in the last 2 years, I just started making these intuitive gesture drawings. And I could only do it in 2 years. I've been practicing for 20 years, but what's interesting is that inner critic. It was only in about 15 years in of artist practice that I kind of annihilated its voice in my experience of making. And it's just a really beautiful thing to get in touch with your inner child. When I work with therapy, with my therapist, I'll do meditations and stuff to do inner child work. But what I found that's really profound that came out in making this book, which I'm actually selling if you're interested at a discount this week, is that I could remake things from the meditation and reinforce them in art materials. And what I think is really interesting about the acts of creativity and imagination is because things happen when we were children, we forget that it's the child's mind that needs the help. And what's really beautiful about getting over these inner critics, and it's very difficult, is we have these beautiful moments, like as individuals, in getting to know our inner child and reconnecting with them. And I've come up with projects like little rituals. It doesn't even matter if the outcome is good. It's just the ritual of playing out these things in your body really heals. Like one of them is I was put in my room a lot when I was a kid and left there. And I can't tell you the profound difference it makes to make a little cardboard house, because when you're a kid, imagination is your whole world. A child cannot distinguish between the real and unreal. And what I find very beautiful as an adult is that still lives in our bodies. And if I play and make a little cardboard room, and I make a little Play-Doh mommy, and I make a Play-Doh self, I can replay this pain of having a mommy open the door. And it's very healing, and it fills in these holes that just live in the body really effectively. And when I started this project, I was so disconnected. And there's great beauty in how we draw. If we draw with our right hand, we can discover emotions in our bodies, like my body, and learn what they mean. And the way we draw, we keep repeating these patterns. And I have this character always in the ground. What's really lovely is as you see these repeating characters, you can start providing them the drawing healing. So it's like, well, what would get that character out of the ground? And my therapist helps me with meditation. But lately, I've been replaying those meditations with Play-Doh and with drawing to give them what they need. So we can make like a comic book of providing them with their needs. And like I have some shame ones where I had a drawing where I made a character just expel all the shame that wasn't theirs. This character is this monster character. And I made it throw up everything, the mistaken belief I had. And what's really beautiful is when I made the next drawing, I realized there was a child. The monster was just a child that was just this thing. And when mistaken beliefs were gone, and just making these drawings, it was just such a beautiful epiphany. And those epiphanies are just really profound. And like I said, best practices for doing this is to re-engage with those really tough things, which for survivors is really hard, is play time, giving yourself permission to let go and play, to ignore that inner critic that is always in your head, and telling it to go away, to re-engage with that innocent essence that's in your heart that is never gone. But it's just those rituals and just reclaiming these moments and just offering yourself this healing as in any way that you can. And they can be really silly. I've done ones where I've done just origami. I remember I had some identity issues, and I just thought of animals I wanted to make online. So I made an origami dragon, but before I made it, I wanted to write what that as a personality was in that dragon. And then when I folded it, it becomes this ritual where you get to live something you've made and let it just go in your body, something positive. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share today, is just whatever childish like things you think doesn't have meaning, because you were a child, it actually really does. And that sense of play is very healing. I'm a professor. I can finish on time, apparently.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you everyone for being here today. I just wanted to ask if anyone has questions. And well, yes, Rick, I can draw stick people. That's hilarious. There's no need. Jessica and I were talking about this on social media with Stuart about a week and a half ago. You don't have to be, there's no prescription for art. You can take a pencil and just draw what comes to mind, right? And Jessica, you were talking about drawing a response with the dominant hand, and the inner child is the non-dominant hand. We have an activity like that at the Gatehouse where we write letters to our inner children with our dominant hand as the parent, as ourselves as adults, and the non-dominant hand as the inner child responding to the adult. So really cool. Yeah, letting go of that inner critic can sometimes be really difficult, but it's not impossible. And again, the message, you don't have to do this alone. Are there any questions for any of the panelists? I do see that Deb had to go to another interview, so I'm going to post her email on the screen. If anyone needs to and wants to get a hold of Deb, you can definitely do that. That's her email there. Does anyone have any questions, comments? People are saying thank you to everyone. Thank you so much. Okay. Awesome. Great to see you again, Rob, as well. Good. People are saying they enjoyed the session. Thank you so much. Okay, and it is available on live stream. If you go to the Gatehouse, we have a long name. Our legal name is the Gatehouse Investigation and Child Abuse Investigation and Support Site on Facebook. It's there, so you can definitely share it on your social media pages. All right. Thank you, everyone, for all the lovely comments. Thank you to all our presenters for being here today. I'm sure we're going to be seeing each other again very soon, whether it's at Gatehouse or at other events. I'm really grateful to each and every one of you for being here today and sharing all that you've shared. Have a safe and wonderful rest of your afternoon.